Amherst College has released an Orwellian common language guide to police students' speech on campus. We will examine the most perverse definitions as well as the left's obsession with language. Then, Portland State pushes speech codes, studies show that trigger warnings are absolutely useless, and Cambridge disinvites Jordan Peterson. What do all of these episodes tell us about the modern left? We will explore. I'm Michael Knowles. This is The Michael Knowles Show. Oh man, I think that what these colleges are doing today is basically covering for those rich parents who bought their kids' way into school. Because that was the big scandal. That was the biggest scandal in higher education ever concerning elite universities until about 5 minutes later when these universities again and again, speech codes, common language guides. This is really perverse. This was so bad that the head of the university and the head of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at Amherst both had to issue apologies, both had to pull away this guide. Luckily, we have screenshots so we can read the definitions because this was no accident. What this was is being described as a gaffe. You know, you hear politicians have a gaffe, and what a gaffe is supposed to be is when you mistakenly say something you didn't mean. In reality, what a gaffe is when you say exactly what you mean, but it's not received well and you weren't supposed to say it and you were trying to be more deceptive. That's exactly what's happening here. This is all for a purpose. This ties into the trigger warnings. This ties into disinviting Jordan Peterson. We'll get to all of that. But first, let's make a little money, honey, with Ring. Speaking of safe spaces, you should actually have a safe space, and Ring's mission is to make neighborhoods safer. You probably already know about their smart video doorbells and cameras that protect millions of people everywhere. Ring helps you stay connected to your home anywhere in the world, so if there's a package delivery or a surprise visitor, you know, those kind of surprise visitors who show up in the middle of the night and want to take all your belongings, you will get an alert and be able to see, hear, and speak to them all from your phone. This is thanks to the HD video and two-way audio features on Ring devices. Our producer just the other day, senior producer Jonathan Hay, he gets woken up at 3 a.m. He's lying in his bed with his wife, and there are these two drug-addled wackos who were at his door who were clearly just trying to see if anybody was home. And if no one was home, I don't know, what would have happened? Would they have broken in? Well, fortunately for Jonathan, he has Ring, because we're big Ring fans here at the Daily Wire, so he was able to talk to them right away, immediately. They said, okay, all right, we're going to leave, we're going to... Hey, okay, we're no big deal. Right, of course. He could have been on a beach in Boca, he could have been at the office, or he could have been in his bedroom, which he was. It's amazing technology. It's unbelievably inexpensive for the value. Check it out. Right now, you'll have a special offer on a Ring starter kit available. That is with a video doorbell and motion-activated floodlight cam. The starter kit has everything you need to start building a ring of security around your home. Go to ring.com/Knowles, Knowles, ring.com/Knowles. Now we move from home security to safe spaces on campus. This guide, the Common Language Guide, was sent out by Amherst University. Now, it wasn't sent out by the language departments, wasn't sent out by the English department. You would, Amherst has a good English program. You'd think maybe a guide on language would be sent out by them. No. It wasn't even sent out by the Office of the President or the Office of the Dean of Students. It was sent out by the Office of Inclusion and Diversity. This is something out of 1984. This is something right out of George Orwell, to hear things like the Office of Inclusion and Diversity. What does that office do? What is the purpose of that? Campuses are quite diverse. They've been very diverse for a very long time. They're inclusive. It's a university. That's the point of inclusion. I guess they're not inclusive to all of the conservative speakers that they disinvite, but the Office of Inclusion and Diversity is very often leading the charge to disinvite those people. So what do? They send out Orwellian guides like this. They police people's language. They enforce speech codes. They try to stop the free expression of ideas. They try to enforce a leftist ideology and a leftist orthodoxy. So this is how they described it. They said, quote, "This project emerged out of a need to come to a common and shared understanding of language in order to foster opportunities for community building and effective communication within and across difference. It includes a list of carefully researched and thoughtfully discussed definitions for key diversity and inclusion terms." So right here, you know immediately that today their excuse that this shouldn't have been sent out, it was a mistake, oh, they didn't mean to do it, blah, blah, blah. You know that's not true. They say in their first letter, these are carefully researched. These have been thoughtfully discussed. This is very, very intentional. They tell you twice in one sentence that it's highly intentional. And the purpose of this is very good, ostensibly. The nominal purpose, what they say is, we need a shared understanding of language in order to foster opportunities for community building. Now, the purpose of language is to communicate, right? That's the most basic definition of language. I have my own subjective experience going on in my head. You have your own subjective experience going on in your head. And the only way that we can bridge that unbridgeable gap is through language. What is language? It's letters and words and sounds, all of which are symbols to represent ideas that are outside of both of us. So I look at a tree, and I see the tree, and it's got leaves, and it's got branches, and it's got a trunk. Okay. And I want to communicate the idea of a tree to you. How do we do that? You have your own perception of the tree as well. But unless we have a common word for the common experience in objective reality of the tree, then we can't communicate. That's the purpose of language. You don't need an Office of Diversity and Inclusion to have language. The English language is much older than the Amherst College Office of Diversity and Inclusion. So they say their purpose is to foster opportunities for communication. No. We have words. We have a language. What their real purpose is to rewrite language, to totally change language, to create new terms that connote new ideological constructs so that they can shape the ideology and the orthodoxy on campus. So just an example. What is capitalism? We know what capitalism, right? We know we did a whole episode on it the other day. Basically, it boils down to private property and people producing and exchanging private property, and governments recognizing the rights of private property. Basically what it comes down to. Even the term capitalism is basically just invented and propagated by Marxists. So it's kind of a loaded term, but that's basically what it means. Here is how Amherst's Diversity and Inclusion Office defines capitalism as a, quote, economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than the state. Okay, yeah, basically, I'm good with that. Then they go on. This system leads to exploitative labor practices which affect marginalized groups disproportionately. Hold on a second. I thought this was a dictionary. I thought this was a guide to language. I thought this was just a common language, so we know we're using the same terms. So what they do is they'll take a term, and maybe they'll even define it accurately, and then they'll redefine it. So the first sentence is right. The second sentence is their ideological redefinition of that word. And by the way, in the whole guide, sometimes they don't even start with a real definition. Very often, they just start with the ideology. They define legal and illegal. You would think that this is a fairly basic thing. Legal and illegal. Quote, a highly racialized term. All right, we can stop right there. What? How is legal and illegal a highly racialized term? Legal means lawful, and illegal means unlawful or criminal. There is no etymological or historical or philosophical or any connection to race whatsoever. But that's how it begins, a highly racialized term to describe a person's presence in a nation without government-issued immigration status. First of all, what other immigration status is there, if not government-issued? Is it issued by Johnny down the street? Okay, the government says you're not an immigrant to this country. You're not a legal immigrant. But Johnny says you are. So in that case, you're a legal immigrant, right? Who else would determine immigration status but the civil authority? Of course, this is absurd. Now, the definition goes on. This is not an appropriate noun or adjective to describe an individual. Not appropriate, says who? Oh, says you, because you're policing our language. Often misused to designate certain undocumented members of a society, specifically people of color, to deny their contributions, right to exist, and recognition as people within certain national boundaries. Well, it doesn't undermine their right to exist. The people are allowed to exist. I suppose it does undermine their right to exist within certain national boundaries because there are such things as immigration laws. So what this says is that if you use the words legal or illegal, you are buying into a highly racist, bigoted, awful premise that nations should be allowed to control their own immigration. What this definition does is outlaws, as a matter of speech on campus, anything other than an open borders ideology which denies the nation state entirely. That's just the second one. How about assimilation? This is a related concept. Assimilation, we know assimilation means you go to a new place and you behave like the locals. Paesi che vai, usanze che trovi is what they say in Italy, which is translated roughly or translated idiomatically to when in Rome, do as the Romans do. This is what assimilation is. When I go to Italy, what do? I wear my nice Persol sunglasses and I sip on, Lavazza coffee or what. I just do things that Italians do. Sometimes I do that here as well, but that's because I'm of Italian heritage. If I go to Britain, I'm going to behave differently. If I go to the Middle East, I'm going to behave a little differently. That's assimilation. And certainly when you immigrate somewhere, assimilation really matters because you're going to live there. You want to be part of that community. This is how Amherst College defines it. Assimilation happens, quote, as a response to forms of oppression, including, but not limited to, xenophobia, racism, cis-heteronormativity, and religious oppression, among other types of oppression. If you choose to enter another country and immigrate to that country and live in that country for 30 years, you're not doing it because you're oppressed. If that's oppressive, you can always go home. You should go home. You're asking to do that. You're volunteering to do that. There's nothing oppressive then about the people wanting you to, speak their language, follow their laws, behave a little more like they do than only how you want to behave. But they invert that. What is more oppressive? Invading a foreign country and living there and living off of their welfare and violating their laws and forcing everybody not only to accommodate but celebrate you. Is that more oppressive, or is it oppressive to say, hey, if you want to come to the greatest country on earth and we're going to let you stay even though you broke our laws, maybe speak English? Which do you think is more oppressive? They define oppression, by the way. Oppression is predicated upon access to institutional power. Oh, see, this is how they're going to tell me that only big, bad, straight, white men who think that they're men, they're the only ones who can be oppressive. So you can't be oppressive if you invade somebody's country, take all their welfare, violate their laws, and force everyone to celebrate you. That's not oppressive because it's predicated upon access to institutional power. Marginalized communities do not have access to institutional power. So it says women can be as prejudiced as men, but women cannot be just as sexist as men, because they do not hold political, economic, and institutional power. Of course, this is nonsense. Let's take one institution, the institution that sent out this guide, Amherst College. At American universities, women constitute the majority of students. Not even that slim a majority. They got a few points on men. So actually, they do have institutional power, specifically at the institution that is claiming that they don't. How about political power? In the United States, women have the right to vote. There are more women in the United States than men. More importantly, there are many more women voters than men voters. Women have about a 15-point voter gap on men. So actually, if we're talking about institutional political power, women have way more political power in the United States than men do. Just using their own definitions, but it doesn't matter. What they need to do is not just define the word, but then have that little explainer line afterward. Women cannot be just as sexist as men. Marginalized communities do not have access to institutional power. But they do. So what happens if they do? I guess what it means is they're not that marginalized. They're really not very marginalized communities. And then this brings us to American exceptionalism. This is an historical, philosophical, political, linguistic construct that ostensibly a good university completely misunderstands. Before we get to that, let's make a little money, honey, with honey. You know how much I love honey. Honey is the only way to buy stuff online. Have you ever bought something online and you missed a discount? Discount came up a day later, or you missed it on a certain website. I have not shopped without Honey online for years, since before the Daily Wire existed. I am a true believer. It's a free browser app, or free browser add-on rather, that will find you the best deals online. It finds discounts and coupons across 37,000 websites, Amazon, Sephora, Best Buy, Nordstrom, more. It is basically free money. That's all this is. They always ask, what was the last thing I bought on Honey? I always say, what was the last thing I didn't buy on Honey? I don't think I've made a purchase without Honey in years. Here's a good example. Last one, I just wanted to buy a tie. I needed to get a new tie. Figured I'm looking a little too casual. And ties can range in price from $100 a tie to $20 a tie or something like that. And so I saw a tie I really liked. It's like $100, but I don't want to spend that kind of money. And then just it finds there, and it saved me like 60% or something like that. Make sure you use Honey. Honey has saved its 10 million members an average of $28.61. That's over 10 million people. I tell you, it saved me over $1,000, certainly, probably much more than that. Honey members have already saved more than $800 million total. Not bad for something that's completely free and takes just 2 clicks to install. Has over 100,000 5-star reviews from the Google Chrome store. Time magazine calls Honey basically free money. I call it that too. No reason not to try it. It's free to use, easy to install, takes just 2 clicks. Shop with confidence, get Honey for free at joinhoney.com/covfefe, C-O-V-F-E-F-E. That's joinhoney.com/covfefe, C-O-V-F-E-F-E. Honey, the smart shopping assistant that saves you time and money when you're shopping online. Okay. American exceptionalism. This is how Amherst defines it. A belief in the superiority, rightful leadership, and special moral status of the United States and its people, originally grounded in the 17th century Puritan and Protestant religious culture. So you see how they start right away, a belief in the superiority. Now, the reason that they go for that is because the word exceptional is misused and misunderstood, especially by illiterates like the people at the Office of Inclusion and Diversity at Amherst University. We think of exceptional as excellent or superlative or just the best thing ever. Exceptional refers to exceptions, deviation from the norm. And America is certainly an exceptional country. It's unlike other countries. It was from its very beginning, it was founded and developed differently than the old world. That's why it's the new world. It was discovered by Christopher Columbus, a devout Christian, greatest navigator of his age. It was obviously founded by pilgrims at Plymouth. It was founded by people at Jamestown who wanted a better life. It was founded by people who basically were not of the aristocracy. They were not entrenched in the old world. There was a new beginning here. There were traditions that they brought with them. There was a culture. There was a religion that they brought with them. But it developed differently, and it developed a little separately from the rest of the world. It then fired the shot heard around the world. It launched, perhaps in the history of the world, the only conservative revolution. It wasn't a radical leftist revolution like the French Revolution. It was a conservative revolution, in so much as there can be one. It conserved those traditions. It's been a beacon of liberty for the rest of the world. That's an exception. That's why the United States has a unique role in the world. It's not necessarily to say superior in every and all ways, but that's what they say, because they want to denigrate that idea by misrepresenting it. And then they have, oh my gosh, the white savior complex. Have you ever heard of this? This is a new term. So they're not just redefining other terms like American exceptionalism, they're introducing new ideological terms. American exceptionalism, or white savior complex, an attitude or posture of condescending benevolence based on the idea that white people inherently are in a position to, and are qualified to save people of color. This can be seen internationally as well as domestically. See Eurocentrism and American exceptionalism. So what this term is actually talking about is that Western culture developed beyond any other culture in the history of the world, religiously, politically, technologically. The obvious one is technologically, because the West broadly invented every single thing that's ever been invented, and made virtually every discovery that has ever been discovered. But politically, this is true as well. Look around the rest of the world. Sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, Asia, pre-Columbian American systems of government. Do those systems of government protect the rights of minorities? No. Do those systems of government treat women in a particularly nice way? No. Do those systems of government protect liberty in an individual and family-based and community-relevant sense? No. Are those cultures, have they very often delved into tyrannies that make life short and brutish and miserable? Yes. I'm just talking about politically. And so what they're saying is, how dare you say that Western culture is better than other cultures? We're going to accuse that statement of being racist. So you see what they do. They're saying, to use the term Western is so wrong. You're really talking about whiteness, that white people are better than brown people. That's not what it's saying at all. Also, this is, again, just another evidence of these people's ignorance. When you think about the great figures in history, in Western history, are they all blonde-haired, blue-eyed guys? I don't think that's true. One example I think of is St. Augustine of Hippo, one of the 5 greatest minds in the history of the West. He was from Carthage. Something tells me he was a bit swarthy. I'm a bit swarthy myself, I'll have you know. The discoverer of the Americas was Italian, a little on the darker side as well. But they have to paint all of the West as this just Aryan, white, blonde, blue-eyed, racially uniform type thing, because they can't grapple with the ideas, they can't grapple with history. So they write it off as bigoted. And then just very briefly, I have to mention the other 2 terms they included there, tucking and packing. Do you know what these terms are? If you're watching with a young child, please cover his ears right now. Tucking is when a man really wants to look like a woman. He tucks. And when a woman really wants to look like a man, she packs. This is being described in the Amherst Guide to Language. I mention it, 1, because it's ridiculous, but 2, because it shows you the lengths to which they will go to invent new terms, to invent new language in service of their own ideology. And gender ideology is so central to the left's broader ideological agenda right now. All of this, what is all of this? Very, very different versions of it, but all the same assault on language. This reminds me of the play Alice in Wonderland by Alice Gerstenberg. There's a passage in Alice in Wonderland where Alice is talking to Humpty Dumpty. Humpty Dumpty says, "When I use a word, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less." Alice responds, "The question is whether you can make words mean different things. The question is, which is to be master, that's all. Impenetrability, that's what I say. Would you tell me, please, what that means? I meant by impenetrability that we've had enough of that subject, and it would be just as well if you'd mention what you mean to do next, as I suppose you don't mean to stop here all the rest of your life." That little exchange tells you everything you need to know about this language battle that's going on. The left, like Humpty Dumpty, wants to use a word and just have it mean whatever they say that it means. Now, Alice asks the question that we're all asking. Can you make words mean different things than they mean? And Humpty Dumpty asks the real question. Which is to be master? To use words accurately, to use words to mean what they mean, or to redefine words altogether? In the long run, reality reasserts itself, but in the short run, the left knows that they can impose their tyranny over logic, over reason, by redefining the words. Humpty Dumpty says, impenetrability. And what does he mean by impenetrability? He says, go away now. Go away. I'm not talking about this. He sends Alice away, who's asking for some reason. That's what's happening at even our elite universities. Amherst College is considered a very good college. And this is the sort of thing that they're putting out. Impenetrability. Which is to be mastered? That is the question. We've got a lot more to talk about. We've got to talk about how this ties into trigger warnings, Jordan Peterson, and the mailbag. But first, go over to dailywire.com. $10 a month, $100 for an annual membership. You get me, you get the Andrew Klavan Show, you get the Ben Shapiro Show, you get the Matt Walsh Show. You get to ask questions in the mailbag. You get to ask questions in Backstage, which is coming up. You get Another Kingdom, and you get a far better drinking vessel than this. I'm currently sipping out of a mustachioed little cup in my hotel room. It's not as good. You need the Leftist Tears tumbler. Although I'm afraid that before I get my flight tomorrow and I get out of Missouri, I'm going to drown in a deluge. I'm going to have to turn my plane ticket in for a boat ticket. Make sure that you have the Leftist Tears tumbler. You will find yourself inconvenienced as I am. Go to dailywire.com. We'll be right back with a lot more in the mailbag.